Okay, here's a lesson for differentiation with emphasis on reading. Why, where, when, who, and what. The W's. The purpose of differentiation in your classroom is to answer the question, every child has a right to a free, appropriate public education. But what is appropriate for each one? That's the question. What's appropriate is whatever they can learn and what they can understand. But doing that doesn't come easily to all teachers because we have a very diverse population. Let's all try something. I want you each to answer a few questions for me. Think of the most recent thing that you read. Why did you read it? Did you choose it freely or was it assigned? What did you already know about the topic? Did you already have an interest in it? Were you able to use what you learned by thinking about it, arguing about it, talking about it, or applying it in some way? Okay, I want you to each think of your answers to that, get into groups, and talk to each other about what you find. Okay. Furthermore, let's compare what you found with what we found from middle school students. So, one concept might be make your reading meaningful to the students. So connect it to the students. We have to make the reading meaningful, interesting, and purposeful for them. For instance, I want everybody to read these 3 sayings, which are up here on the board. First, the notes were sour because the seam split. The voyage wasn't delayed because the bottles shattered. The haystack was important because the cloth ripped. Now, I want you to count backwards from 30 by 3s, and then once you've gotten to 0, I want you to write those 3 phrases on the first sheet that was in your folder. Go. How are you doing? Have you been able to write what was on there? Okay, let's try that again. Now, we're going to have prompts for each of these sentences. The notes were sour because the seam split. That has to do with bagpipes. The voyage wasn't delayed because the bottle shattered. That was a ship christening. And the haystack was important because the cloth ripped. That was a parachute. It's very important because the cloth ripped. The haystack turned out to be very important. Okay. Write those down again. Were you able to write more the second time? Probably so. These sentences were memorable this time because they were placed in context. So, what have we learned? Learning should be related to the students, made memorable by placing the learning into context for them. But what is their context? What do they know? What do they like? How do they learn things and how do they remember? Memory goes through different stages. Okay, you are now experiencing sensory input. You can probably hear this and you can see this. It's sensory input. So it goes into your mind, and if you haven't stored it somehow, the information that is not transferred somewhere is lost. So you could transfer it into your short-term memory, STM. And once again, if this information is not transferred, it will be lost. Now your short-term memory can only hold a few things. It can only hold about 7 plus or minus 2 things at a time. So if you can only remember a few things, you need to keep it in there. And what happens once it's in your short-term memory? What is this long-term memory? It has explicit parts, which are those experiences you've had that are events, episodic events. Or it might be semantic, knowledge and concepts, things that words could explain. Or it might be something implicit, not explicit. For instance, you know exactly how to come into the classroom and sit down and get your things ready. That's procedural. You know those skills and those actions. You also know emotional conditioning. So, what are some ways we could improve our memory and our learning? We mentioned that when things come into your short-term memory, only a few things can be kept in there at a time. 7 things plus or minus 2, so that could be 5 to 9 things in there. So put things into small groups. Now we talked about rehearsal. The more you say things, you say it a number of times, you might remember it. You also might link it to something you already knew in your long-term memory, and this would be called elaborative rehearsal. Think about it deeply and link it to information and memories that make it meaningful. How about that self-reference effect? You could write the notes in your own words. You could take the definitions from the text and rewrite them in your words. You could learn them as they were. So, memory's like a computer. It encodes things, stores them, and you should be able to retrieve them. The human brain can retrieve from multiple locations, so set it up and organize it so that you remember it in a number of different ways, making it most meaningful to yourself. Your brain is organized into schemas or schemata. What are your schemata? They could be anything. Mine include math, science, how to do things physically. I like to play certain sports. I know how to play some games. Those are all my schemata. Bring them up before you try to remember or learn something, and then relate what you're learning to as many other things that you already know as possible, because all these things will be cues for you to remember them. Now, in order to differentiate your classroom for your students, you're trying to find their context so that they'll have the best opportunity to remember or to learn. First thing we might want to know, what are their levels? To find out what level they are on for whatever you're doing, you might want to give the RAT, the Wide Range Aptitude Test. This gives you an idea about their spelling, about their word reading, about their sentence comprehension, and about their math. You could look at their Success Maker scores. Now you have some idea what level they might be on. They might be up here, they might be down there, doesn't matter, but you need to know where they are because that's where you need to teach to them from. People remember the most learning at the level that they are. Secondly, so what is this differentiation? I've given you a number of videos that you can look at. Differentiation is defined in this first video. Watch this to get some clues as to what we mean when we're talking about differentiation in your classroom to make things meaningful for your students. Now, secondly, this second video is similar to the first one and goes into some more detail. And then this third video, which says Learning Classroom Session Overviews, that one, the second one here, the one in a lighter orange, is very interesting because it uses the different intelligences that you found out in your classroom that your students have and how to differentiate and how to make the most of every lesson using everybody's strengths. It doesn't mean that they only approach the lesson from that, they might approach it from that strength, but they will know it in the end from all different directions. But they might start there because that's the easiest for them to start with. Watch that video and get some. Back to this third video. This has all kinds of fun things that are happening that will help you in the classroom. You don't need to be stiff. You don't need to be just the sage on the stage. You can actually be part of the action. And you can allow the kids to be teaching themselves. This will show you some examples of it. Okay, now that you've watched all those videos and you have some ideas what you can do, please form a group. Your group now has 10 minutes to come up with a differentiation plan that includes some strategies and specific things that could be done in your classrooms using those strategies. In your group, try to choose your people person, a speaker, a writer, and maybe a resource person. If you have a very small group, each of you could have more than one task. Have your speaker present your plan later, and then later we'll vote for the best plan. So you have 10 minutes, form your groups, let's try it. Okay, you've presented your plans, we've chosen the best plan, but there's never just one plan. You've seen that everybody has different intelligences, interests, levels of current knowledge, and learning styles. The same goes for teaching. So you go out there and differentiate your classroom the best that you can, and good luck.